How can one recruiter question cost people $200,000? In this video, you'll learn what you're really negotiating for in tech job offers, why the first recruiter call is a trap with answers to salary expectation questions, and the negotiation timeline that multiplies more than just your compensation. I've been able to negotiate over $2 million a year in tech offers. I'm a tech executive who's worked in Silicon Valley, Seattle, New York. If this is useful to you, please like this video for the algorithm so many more people can get value from it, or share it directly with someone who's about to look for a new job. Now, when you get an offer, how much money you're going to be making in 1 year over the course of 4 years is called total compensation. And that's made up of your base salary, how much you get in your paycheck every month, your equity, which is your stock options, RSUs, whatever it happens to be, depending if you're in a startup all the way up to a big public company. And that's usually vested over 4 years, usually equally, but all of these things have exceptions. So it's hard to make a video about Google or Uber or a IPO company or a seed stage startup all in the same time, because all of them have slightly different ways of doing equity. I can probably do a whole video on equity just for startups, growth stage companies, and FANG. And then the other one is performance bonus. This is usually like 15 to 25% given based on your performance and the company's performance every year. And so it's important to get your base salary up because your performance bonus is actually based on whatever your base salary is. And then there's a sign-on bonus. And this is usually the sweetener, the very last thing that you're going to negotiate during the process. It's usually used to close a gap in your total compensation. And it's a check that's usually given right when you start. And if you leave the company within, let's say, 6 months or under a year because it doesn't work out, you might have to give that money back. But this is a very powerful tool, especially because very few people actually last more than 2, 3, 4 years at a specific company, especially today in tech. And you're going to move to many different roles during your career. So you do want to make sure that you front load your compensation in whatever offer you're going to get. And then, of course, there are other things like 401k matching, whatever your medical insurance is. This can be more or less important to people based on their life circumstances. But total compensation isn't the whole value of your offer. Your offer value is actually made up of your total compensation, like we talked about, but also what's your total career value, or I would like to call it, how much is this your skip prep, not just for the next role after this or the next promotion after this, but 2 promotions after that. Is this going to fill in the rest of your skill sets so that when you go and apply for that next role or 2 roles from now, you're going to have the projects, the skills, and the experience needed to qualify for that next level. So you should really be planning this out when you're making your offer decisions. Of course, title, level, and scope all matter a lot. Title matters a little less than scope and level, but if you are going to certain companies, they do care about title. If you go to somewhere like your manga or FANG companies, then they actually know based on your scope where you should be leveled, and they don't really care too much about your title. And the last piece is actually lifestyle, which matters a lot. Is it remote? Is it in your geographical region? Is it in a high cost or low cost of living area? Does it have unlimited PTO, or is it only 2 weeks of vacation every year? These things are partly negotiable, but they are big factors when you're trying to decide between multiple offers. The main key points in your negotiation timeline are when you apply and figuring out which companies you're applying to when, how you set the expectations for level and title at the beginning, your first recruiter call where you can do more of that, but also understand a lot about the company and answer the question that they usually give you, which is what are your salary expectations? You also then can make sure that you lock in the right interview process for the right level and role that you want. Then you move on to the interview stage where the recruiter may still badger you with salary questions. The important thing to do here is to boost your value by doing well in your interviews and find more leverage. And then finally, at the offer stage, there's the pre-offer stage, the offer call. You're going to be doing some counters if you have multiple offers on the table, and you want to make sure that you build your advocates to go to back so you can justify things internally. Let's start with the first recruiter screen. In your first recruiting call, the recruiter is going to try and start the salary negotiations, but this is when you have the very least perceived value to the company. All they know about you is maybe some reference and maybe your resume. You have not done interviews. You have not figured out exactly what they need from you and told your story so you can increase your value over the interview process. This is not the time to negotiate. You want to make sure you do not negotiate here. Do not bring up your expected salary. You do not bring up what your past salary is. You try to avoid these questions. The recruiter wants to make their life super easy. They want to be able to close you. They think there's a higher probability of closing you if they can get you to commit to a number that they agree upon. And they might want to even weed you out saying, oh, this person is going to ask too much for this role. The problem is if you give them a number and they say, hey, that's too high from us, now You could probably give them that same number at the end of the process once you've got buy in from the executive, buy in from your hiring manager, you've given them lots of justification, you've rocked all of your interviews. At the end of the process, where then they say, this person is actually deserving this much, or maybe we need to give them a level bump or a new title, and we're willing to give them more money and make an exception. You can't do that in your first recruiting call. So during the first recruiting call, you don't want to weed yourself out. You don't have any leverage. You don't have any perceived value to the company. Make sure you don't negotiate here. Things that are not negotiable now can become negotiable later. So the first thing that happens during the recruiting call is that they ask you about your salary expectations. And of course, you've heard this a million times, never give them the number first. And this is a probabilities thing. There are definitely some situations that are not predictable where if you gave them a salary number first, you might have anchored them higher than they would have anchored you, and maybe you would have been able to get to a slightly higher number. In most situations, we're talking about 75% of the time, let's say, if you give them a number, you are really drastically putting yourself at a disadvantage because you might be thinking this number is $100,000 more than I made before. But for them, they might have thought you could have made $200,000 or $300,000 more than you did before. And you need to be able to discover their price first, what they think is their price, and then move them up from there. And you can move them up significantly, so don't worry about them giving the first number. Next, instead, you want to flip it and find out what their leverage is. Just like you have your own best alternative to a negotiated agreement, they have their own. How long have they been actually looking for this position? How important is this position? How unique is the role? What is their budget? Are they cash constrained right now? Are they raising a new round of equity if they're a startup? Did they just have a hiring freeze or not? These things are really important to understand how aggressive you're going to be in the negotiation. And then finally, you can negotiate the process. You want to figure out who needs to be the approver, how much time it takes, what are the stages between you starting the interview process to you getting an offer, to you accepting the offer and getting a specific equity and salary package approved. This is important because you can identify certain players that you can be talking to throughout the process and making your advocates. The other factor that's really important is what are they considering you for in terms of level? And usually this can be one level or two levels that they're interviewing for. And based on the interview process, you might go up or down. But if this is not the level that you think you're going to get paid what you deserve and is not the scope you're looking for in your career, this is the time to start thinking about maybe I should be interviewing at the level up. And it's better to do that before than after the process is over. So let's go step by step. What if they ask you, what are your salary expectations? You don't answer, you ask. For example, first, you can couch this by saying it's too early in the process. There's so many variables at play. And after I learn more about the company, and after I interview, and after I learn more about the role and the scope of the job, I'm sure we together should be able to get to something that's agreeable and get to a yes. Then you start asking them questions. What's your budget and band for this role? And remember, companies in California, for example, are required to give a salary band. However, they've fudged this law a little bit in that Google might have a salary band, but that salary band is actually comprised of three salary bands. There's the low salary band, the mid salary band, and the top of salary band. And they might give only the low salary band as the one that they tell you right then. It doesn't mean that within that level, that's actually the max amount they want to give you. And it's more like from a certain point of view, this is our salary band, because there are exceptions to be made. And there's just an extra step in an exception process to be done to be able to go outside of that band to the higher bands. If they're a private company or an early stage startup, you might want to ask them, how did they value their equity today? And this is a question that you'll probably want to ask later on, but can help frame your expectations for how much equity you're going to get and whether they've over or undervalued their company at the current price. For example, companies may raise at the top of the market at a certain valuation, then all the public market comparables all drop by 30-40%, but they haven't corrected that in when they're giving out their offer. So you're going to actually want to ask for even more equity to get to what your public comparable offer is going to be. Then you want to ask them about the process. How are decisions approved? And then in some cases, you might want to ask them, what is your compensation philosophy as a lesser known company? Do you try and go after top talent? Are you looking for people who are really mission driven? What is your philosophy on this? And then if you're really confused, you could ask them, what are some comparable levels at Meta or Google who are top paying companies? And they might say, this is equivalent to an E5 at Meta. And that gives you a really good set of data points that you can go forward with later in the negotiation. No matter what they say, you probably just want to say, I'm sure we'll make something work later. Salary expectation questions can sometimes get pretty intense. So we created a free guide and a video workshop on this channel. go to feelvalued.co/salary-expectations-guide to handle tricky questions from startups to big tech. Now, levels really matter. Levels are a pretty complicated topic. Thankfully, there's levels.fyi to help you understand what levels are at different companies for different roles. But figuring out which level you're going to be interviewing for makes a big difference in your compensation. If you look at these levels from Meta, let's say you come in and you think you should be an E6 and make $625,000 on average, but then you revealed that they're actually considering you for an E5 position. That's $225,000 on average in difference in compensation. So in that case, you want to make sure that you can justify to them that you should be going for an E6, figure out exactly what they need from an E6, try to get that interview loop, rock that interview loop, and immediately you've made yourself $200,000 negotiating in one conversation. The other factor here is that if you're an E5, it might actually take you 1 year to make any impact, and then 2 years and 3 years to even be considered to move from E5 to E6. Now, companies have very different compensation philosophies. Even between Google, Meta, and Amazon, there are big differences, but imagine how that changes when you go to Airbnb or Instacart or an early stage startup. There's a huge swath of difference in how companies think about compensation. And then a pretty simple framework is that there are companies that really just want to go bottom of the barrel. They'll get some market data from a third party and they'll say, this is the market range for this is how much we should pay for this role. And we'll target the 25th percentile, which is the lowest 25%. Another company might say, we want to pay top of market rate, which is usually the 80th percentile. We'll try and target on average, getting the 80th percentile in this bracket. We're willing to throw a lot of money at people because we want the best talent. That's going to matter a lot to us. And that changes for the companies by function. Maybe a company is more product driven and really wants the best product managers. Another company might be more design driven. Another company might care only about AI researchers and they're willing to pay them a lot while they pay their other engineers a little bit less. So it makes a big difference between different companies, what their compensation philosophy is. And that affects more than almost anything else, how much you're going to get paid, even if you as an individual and your skills and what you bring to the company doesn't change at all. This is why when people say, hey, what is the fair market value for me as a software engineer or a product manager or product designer? It doesn't exist. Every company will value you differently. For example, I went out and had 2 executive opportunities, both B2C, both had similar revenue, both public companies, but the offers range from $500,000 to $2 million. And that's like a 4x difference just because their compensation philosophies were different. Sometimes if this is a role that you really want and the company you really care about working for, then you might want to try to break their frame. This will usually work for smaller companies or new divisions within companies where an executive has a little bit more power, but you want to make them realize that paying more will create better retained, better talent attracted to the company. And you might actually say, hey, like I might come to this company because I really love the mission, but how am I going to guarantee that I'm going to be working with the best in class and that we're going to really have a great shot of doing this? You need to pay people better to make sure that our team is going to be great so that your company will get even better returns. And you really want to work at a company that really respects and values their talent highly and understands that investing in human capital has an ROI. If you're in a low value, low ROI part of the business, then they're going to reduce how much they're willing to pay you. So let's say you're in a customer success role and you go to one B2B startup where all they care about is sales and they don't care about retention, then you're not going to get paid as much as if you go to another company that really cares about customer lifetime value. Another tip for salary negotiations is make sure you get everything in writing. It is very common, and I've seen this before. Someone did not get things in writing. They had a negotiation. They thought they were at a certain level. They got the offer. They were super surprised. They're like, hey, why is this offer so much lower? Or why is the equity so much lower than I thought it was before? And then they asked for more. And because they had no proof and the recruiter had maybe misspoken or there was some other miscommunication, they had nothing written down. It actually reflected poorly on all sides. There's a bit of a sour taste in everybody's mouth. And the negotiation didn't go nearly as well as they wished it had. And they did not get that original offer. If they had gotten the other side to email everything to them, or if they didn't agree to that, email them afterwards, CCing, saying, hey, these are the things we talked about, just sending this as a confirmation, and the other side had seen it, at least to acknowledge it, or even replied with a thank you, then they wouldn't have had any dispute at the end. And this can clear up communication during the process and avoid surprises later. So now let's do a deep dive into the interview side of the salary negotiation process. Now, during the process, remember, they need to like you, they need to think you deserve it, they need to justify it internally, and they need to think that you're still winnable. So Goals for interview process. I've been on both sides of the table for over a decade, and even I get stressed. That's why we offer one-on-one negotiation support with our experts at Valued. We've helped over 400 candidates like you, not just with advice. You get scripts, mock live negotiation simulations, and get real-time support. If you want to safely make the most of your negotiation, book a free strategy call at feelvalued.co. You want to build rapport with your hiring manager, your future boss, your recruiter, who's going to be the internal person to go to bat for you. So if they don't like you, trust me, no one's going to like you. Your skip manager, who can make even bigger approvals happen for you, and the entire team, who are going to debrief with the other folks in this group later on. You want to score super highly so they can think you deserve more and be able to justify it internally. You want to show your unique value, which we'll talk about in a second. And you want to signal that you're super interested in this company. Everyone should go to bat saying, hey, I think this person not only should come here, but really wants to be here. They will be much more willing to fight for you in negotiations if that's the case. You want to be able to manage timelines. So make sure that you're lining things up. So if you're going to have multiple offers, they line up around the same time, or that you're going to have more time to build your case if you get like a promotion at your current job. Everything I told you about protecting leverage is useless if you don't know how to execute when you get that offer. Watch this video to see the exact counter offer process that can safely unlock above band increases and up levels.